Good morning. Welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Amarachi Ubari. Here are the headlines this morning. Russian rocket strike on Ukrainian train station kills 22, injures dozens of Ukrainians on the Independence Day, 6 months also into the invasion. Ukrainians in Greece, Germany and other countries celebrate Independence Day with music and fanfare. And Russia detains 2 Zaporizhzhia nuclear workers for handing information to Ukraine. We begin now. A Russian rocket strike on a Ukrainian train station has killed 22 people on the day marking 6 months since Moscow's invasion began. A statement from Ukraine says 5 victims in the attack in the eastern town of Chaplin burned to death in a vehicle. An 11-year-old was also killed. President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the strike in the middle of a UN Security Council meeting. He said about 50 people were injured. Russia has so far made no comment about it, but it has repeatedly denied targeting civilian infrastructure. President Volodymyr Zelensky said he learned of the strike on Chaplin in the Dnipropetrovsk region as he was preparing to speak to the Security Council, adding that this is how Russia prepared for the UN Security Council meeting. Now, in April, a strike on another train station killed more than 50 people. Ukraine has spent Wednesday marking its annual Independence Day, and Mr. Zelensky had previously said Russia might do something cruel to disrupt the celebrations. Residents of a small town of Chaplin in eastern Ukraine mourned their loved ones who were amongst the rubble of their destroyed homes. There was no sound, one of them said, noting that nothing was heard, just an explosion. Fire explosion started, according to this local resident. Another said he lost his 11-year-old son in the strike, saying we looked for him here in the ruins and he was lying there. Nobody knew that he was here. President Zelensky's aide, Krylo Tymoshenko, said Russian forces had shelled Chaplin twice. A boy was killed in the first attack when his house was hit by a missile, and 21 people died later when rockets hit the railway station and set fire to 5 carriages of a passenger train. Representative to the United Nations, Sergei Christoster, says plans by Russian-backed authorities to try Ukrainian prisoners of war could mean a point of no return for peace talks with Russia. Ambassador Christoster was joined by several UN representatives to read a statement condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine 6 months since it began. He said his opinions beyond the statement were his own. Countries joining the Ukrainian statement include Australia, Canada, Finland, France, Germany, Sweden, the United Kingdom, the United States, and those from the European Union. And before the joint statement was read out, Russia's representative, Vasily Nebenzia, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had no appetite for negotiations. The head of the Russian-backed separatist administration in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region said earlier this month that a trial of captured personnel from Ukraine's Azov regiment would take place by the end of the summer.
The only thing I would like to say that if the Russians will go ahead with their theatrical court and against the members of Azov battalion, it may mean the point of no return when it comes to the possibility of peace talks with the Russians. We call upon the Russian Federation to stop its total disregard of its obligations under international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, international humanitarian law, and the international human rights law. We condemn in the strongest terms sustained missile strikes by the Russian armed forces on the territory of Ukraine, which have repeatedly hit residential areas and civilian infrastructure, resulting in harms to displacement and deaths of thousands of civilians during the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
We heard nothing. They are not contacting, not negotiating. President Zelensky is saying that the condition to negotiate is full Russian withdrawal from the territory of Ukraine, and that does not limit, he does not limit it to the current status, but to the previous one as well. Now he's saying that if there is a tribunal over the criminals from Azov in Mariupol, that will close the road to negotiations. And he lost appetite to negotiations very early in the conflict, very early on in the conflict after the heavy Western support with armaments that followed from the West. And we clearly see no appetite for negotiations from him now as well, which was proved by what he was saying today at today's meeting.
Now, the United Nations Security Council did meet on Wednesday to mark the 6-month anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with no sign of any easing of the hostilities. The meeting coincided with Ukraine's Independence Day, commemorating the end of Soviet rule in 1991. The war has killed thousands of civilians. It's forced more than a third of Ukraine's 41 million people from their homes, left cities in ruins, and shaking the global economy, creating shortages of essential food grains and pushing up energy prices. Security Council members raised a wide array of security concerns, but looming large was the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, Europe's largest, which was captured by Russian troops in March.
Today marks a sad and tragic milestone. 6 months since Russia's 24th of February invasion of Ukraine. During this devastating period, thousands of civilians have been killed and injured, including hundreds of children. And countless others have lost their family members, friends, and loved ones. The world has seen grave violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law committed with little to no accountability. And millions of Ukrainians have lost their homes and their worldly possessions, becoming internally displaced or refugees. With the onset of winter, humanitarian needs continue to rise rapidly, with millions of people in need of assistance and protection. I remain gravely concerned about the situation in and around Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia. The warning lights are flashing. Any actions that might endanger the physical integrity, safety, or security of the nuclear plant are simply unacceptable. Any further escalation of the situation could lead to self-destruction. The security of the plant must be ensured, and the plant must be re-established as purely civilian infrastructure.
Several hundreds of Ukrainians living in Athens unfurled a huge Ukrainian flag on Wednesday and marched through the capital to mark the country's Independence Day. Dressed in the blue and yellow national colors, 24-year-old Katerina Trofimova said that after 6 months of war, Ukrainians were united and would stay that way. Ukraine declared independence from the Soviet Union in 1991 of August, and its population voted overwhelmingly for independence in a referendum that December. The 31st anniversary of its independence fell exactly 6 months after Russia sent tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine. More than 47,000 Ukrainians have arrived in Greece since February, and a quarter of those are children, according to Greece's migration ministry. Several thousand Ukrainians also marked Independence Day in Berlin, in Germany, with a freedom parade through the capital to show the world that they are strong, united, and free. Participant Jane Kopsiva from Kharkiv said there are so many Ukrainians and half of them don't really want to be here. She also wants to go back. She looked at the dog on her arm, saying she missed her family, she missed her friends, and she missed her life back home. And this video from the Donetsk region shows a Ukrainian flag being raised into the sky with balloons as the country marks Independence Day. A video filmed in the city of Advika showed people cheering as the flag was flying in the sky. I guess we have the wrong video. But in normal years, a day of celebrations hailing the end of Soviet rule in 1991, this Independence Day took place 6 months, as we've been saying, after Russian President Vladimir Putin sent troops over the border. Thousands of people have been killed. Millions have fled their homes. Cities have been laid to waste by bombardments. But the day also reaffirmed Ukrainians' resolve and Western support for their struggle. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also joined scores of Ukrainian nationals for the unfurling of a large Ukrainian flag on Brussels' landmark Grand Place Square. Participants celebrated the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's Declaration of Independence, also singing the Ukrainian national anthem, chanting slogans, and wearing a traditional shirt known as Vyshyovsky. I don't want to mispronounce that, I'm sorry. A few meters from there, the city's iconic peeing statue, known as a mannequin piss, was wearing the Ukrainian embroidered shirt as well.
Corps in Toronto. Шановна українська громада, it's a really great pleasure to address you.
In New York's Central Park, Ukrainian nationals and local people unveiled the Banner of Courage, which they say is the world's largest national flag of Ukraine. Dozens of people were seen carrying smaller flags or wrapping themselves around them. One protester at the park, Sofia Bedri, said Ukraine has always been independent and would be in the future. Meanwhile, in Canada, a flag-raising ceremony was held outside of Ontario's parliament. Anastasia Obidina, a Ukrainian student living in the North American country, said people should continue to stand with Ukraine as it is not only fighting for its freedom, but also for all democratic countries. Two employees of Ukraine's Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant have been detained for passing information to Ukrainian authorities, according to Russia's National Guard and a Russian-installed official in the region. The National Guard and the installed officials said it had prevented what it called illegal actions that threatened the plant's security, and arrested two nuclear plant workers, along with a third person it said had violated the plant's access procedures and collaborated with the Ukrainian armed forces. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, Europe's largest, has been under Russian control since March 4. It remains close to the front line and has come under repeated fire in recent weeks, raising fears of a nuclear disaster. Both Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of shelling the plants. On Tuesday, the UN nuclear watchdog said in a statement it would visit the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant within days if talks to gain access succeed. Joining us now is Dr. Olena Snyder. She's an expert at the Center for Global Studies Strategy in Ukraine. Dr. Olena, thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time. And well, I know it's not Independence Day, it's just the day after, but I think a happy Independence Day is still appropriate, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's right.
It is. And how are you feeling, seeing all these celebrations taking place across the world and, people in Ukraine just struggling to make sense of, this war that's beclouded all of the celebrations they should have had on Wednesday?
That's a really strange and interesting feeling, like on the personal level, yeah. It's a kind of a special day when you notice that almost everyone in the world knows about that and celebrates it and at least heard something about that. And yeah, so much support, so much warm words from world leaders and from ordinary people and from societies, different societies. So it really gives us strength, and it's healing, because it is very necessary now, while, as you mentioned, we are struggling for our future. For in Ukraine, it is also a very special day, because many people suddenly realize the value of independence and the value of freedom. They can compare, because before it was like normal, it was normality, like to be free, to be independent, like it was okay. It's very important, but still ordinary day. But from in this year, it's something really, really special for millions. And it gives strength for our soldiers in the front line, also the support, the society, support from society and support from the world gives strength for our soldiers to stand and to fight, and to fight for future, so that we still can have a lot of these dates in front of us in our future. That's it.
Did you ever think, that Ukraine would still be fighting this war on Independence Day and even beyond? Did you think the war would ever last up to 6 months?
Yeah, frankly speaking, yes, because we see that our enemy, well, Russian Federation, they don't want to stop. So that means that this war can last as long as the enemy is defeated, or I don't want to say there are other scenario, but yeah, we after like probably 1 month, we understood that this will last much longer than we all hoped, and we don't know how long it will last. We would like it to stop as soon as possible, because we lose people, we lose infrastructure, we lose our future every day. But still, we have to fight for our existence. So here is the choice. You cannot choose not to fight, because your enemy is declaring that it wants to defeat you and to kill you. So we don't know how long it will last, but I would say that looking back at the history, when we recall the nearest past, so when we recall, for example, Chechen War, it lasted for 10 years, and finally Ichkeria was eliminated. When we look at the longer past, the previous history, I would say that I would recall and remind everyone that Ukraine has been fighting with Russia 100 years ago also for its independence, and unfortunately we have been defeated, and then the Soviet Union appeared, and not only we have been defeated, but many other countries also. So we all had it in the past, and we all also knew that it could happen again, because the empire has never been decolonized. Russian empire has never been decolonized properly, like it had to be. It has to be still. That's why it's this peace period was just temporary, till the imperialistic forces, they feel that they can get revenge, and that they can make a war again.
Dr. Snyder, I'm wondering, if Ukraine has received, as much support, moral support, or financial or militarily from other countries that also became independent of the Soviet Union in 1991. I mean, you all have the same history. You all have, experienced the same journeys. Do you feel that they have been as supportive of Ukraine during this war?
Of course, this is the support that we feel the most, because these countries, like the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and the countries of former Warsaw Pact, Poland and Slovakia and also Romania and Bulgaria and Hungary. Now Hungary has some dubious policy, ambivalent policy. They know the threat, and they had it all in the past. They had the Russian tanks on their streets in the past. So that's why they support us, also knowing and understanding that if we fall, then they will be the next. So that is their vital interest also to support us against the common enemy, because Russian forces and some Russian parliamentarians and Russian propagandists, journalists, I cannot call them journalists because it's not journalism, it's pure propaganda. They already call for some kind of revenge and war against Baltic countries, against Estonia, and they declare that, okay, Russian army can invade Estonia in 3 hours. Like as they said before, that they can take Kyiv for 3 days, then they give Estonia just 3 hours, because Estonia is quite a tiny country comparing to Ukraine. So that's why we feel this support, of course, because it's their pain also.
It is, and it has become everyone's pain at this time as we watch even from afar. Dr. Olena Snyder, thank you again for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
We have more coming up after the break. Stay with us as Ukrainian MP Yaroslav Zhilesniak says the country is printing money to cover its deficit. On this again. Welcome back to our special coverage. Independence Day was anything but peaceful in Ukraine. More attacks this time from Russia. Artillery shelling caused heavy fire in a shopping mall in a separatist-held Donetsk region on Wednesday. The Russian and separatist news outlets quote officials from self-proclaimed backed by Russia Donetsk People's Republic, who blame Ukrainian forces for the incident. It also said no one was killed or hurt. A local fire chief said large quantities of combustible material had hampered firefighters' efforts to put out the blaze, and said this was exacerbated by a lack of water in the city's emergency water network for firefighting. Donetsk became a frontline city in 2014 when local separatists declared their secession from Ukraine, and Kyiv began what was then called its anti-terrorist operation. Well, Russian media is reporting construction work is ongoing at a concert venue in Mariupol for an open tribunal. A venue is reportedly set to be used by local separatist authorities in the southern Ukrainian city to stage controversial trials of Ukrainian prisoners of war. Images of what appear to be prison cells under construction in the Mariupol Chamber Philharmonic Hall were released earlier this month by Mariupol City Council, which no longer controls the city. A UN Rights Office on Tuesday voiced concerns about plans by Russian-backed authorities to try Ukrainian prisoners of war in Mariupol, possibly within days, saying that such a process could itself amount to a war crime. And the former mayor of Russia's fourth largest city has been arrested on charges of undermining the country's military, part of a crackdown on critics of Moscow's military action in Ukraine. Police arrested 59-year-old Yevgeny Roizman on Wednesday following searches at his apartment and office. Roizman told reporters he was charged under a new law adopted after Russia sent troops into Ukraine on February 24. He faces 5 years in prison if convicted. Russian courts fined Roizman 3 times earlier this year on similar charges, paving the way for a criminal case the law authorizes for repeated offenses. The Moscow branch of Russia's Interior Ministry says a suspect was detained in Yekaterinburg and will be taken to Moscow for investigation. We have joining us Deputy Head of Foreign Desk at Pravda newspaper, Bratislava, Slovakia, Andrej Matisak. He is joining us from Bratislava in Slovakia. Thank you so much, Andrej, for joining us on the program this morning.
Good morning. Good to be back.
Yeah, and you are Ukrainian, right? So what does it feel like watching, what's happening in Ukraine, especially on Independence Day from afar?
Yeah. Look, Ukraine is, of course, the Slovakia's neighbor, and I don't have much to add to what was said in your previous segment. I think it's you had an expert from Ukraine, and of course, I think it's very important to listen to the Ukrainian voices because Ukrainians are experiencing and living through the brutal war waging by Russia. They're trying to survive. They're trying to fight back. So, of course, Slovakia is a part of the EU, part of NATO. We feel relatively safe. We have NATO troops in our territory, and even if even if Ukraine would lose, and as was said previously, Vladimir Putin's appetite might be to go further. We are under the umbrella of NATO, so we feel relatively safe. But of course, we're trying to support Ukraine as much as possible. Slovakia is not a big country, 5.5 million people, but we have sent some military material, anti-aircraft system S-300. Now we are sending the fighting vehicles to Ukraine. So this is something I think which must be sustainable also from the West. I mean, the efforts of supporting Ukraine by financial means, by military means, and let's be honest, it. I think it's good to try to also find some diplomatic ways. But I think that what must be said is also that it's up to the Vladimir Putin to stop this war. He can do it in this moment if he wants.
Well, let me first of all continue by saying I'm sorry for referring to you as Ukrainian. As I understand, you are Slovakian.
Not a problem. Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, you all came from, the same umbrella nation, which is the USSR, which used to exist. But does Slovakia feel a threat that it might become a target for Russia if Russia does succeed in its annexation of Ukraine, which is what analysts believe is currently going on in the country?
Yes, as I said, I think that the threat is there somehow. Also, I think it must be said that when Ukraine fought back on February 24th, probably very few people expected that Ukraine will be so successful in defending. Ukrainians will be so successful in defending their country, and of course, part of this, a huge part of it is the fact that the Western countries are supporting Ukraine, as I said, by financial means and especially by military means, by sending weapons. But what must be emphasized: this is no weapons can, I would say, they replace the courage of the people, of the Ukrainian people. So I think you need both. You really need both. You need the military material, but it's very clear that Ukrainians are willing to fight for their country, and this is, I think, there was somehow unexpected from Putin, but also I think it was somehow before they were unexpected. We didn't expect, I mean, the West that the Ukrainians will be fight so fiercely and really making the life of Russian troops really miserable. So I think that the Russian army is now, Russian armed forces are now quite weakened. Of course, Russia has a lot of different assets that Russia didn't use that much in Ukraine: Air Force, Navy, unfortunately also nuclear. So you cannot exclude that Russia might try, if Russia will be successful in Ukraine, that Russia might try something against the other neighboring country, Baltics, maybe even my country, Slovakia. But I think what is important, I think we simply should put it that way. We should prevent Russia to occupy Ukraine, and then we will be safe. So I think helping Ukraine, we are also helping us.
Yeah, Andre, you did make a point, with the Air Force and the Navy that Russia has not deployed in this war. Instead, it's just the military, forces on the ground, and it's applied, all military weapons and all of that. But, at the initial start of this war, there were also fears that Russia could explore nuclear attacks on Ukraine. Do you think that's a possibility?
Look, I think this is I don't like to talk about it because we are basically talking about a very doomsday scenario, and I'm not sure how much we should talk about it in public, because, in fact, Russia is using this card as a blackmail, basically saying, "Look, we can do this or that if you will support Ukraine." This is clear blackmail. We can see it in Zaporozhye nuclear plant that Russians are there, doing this, doing that, and they are pushing us that don't support Ukraine too much because we can do something really crazy. If you look at the Russian military doctrine, it's quite vague, but it's basically saying that Russia can use the nuclear weapons if let's say the independence or the sovereignty of Russia is threatened. Then the question is that what does it mean? Because at this moment I don't think that the independence and the existence of Russia is threatened. But does it mean that Russia is threatened, or does it mean, for example, that Vladimir Putin might feel threatened? Is Russia equals to Putin? So if he feels that maybe his power is somehow threatened because of, in fact, his decisions to attack Ukraine, that might, I think, create unfortunate situation when, let's say, that the threshold for some kind of use of nuclear weapons might be higher. But I don't think we there.
But he already feels threatened. I mean, the Russian president, he already feels threatened. He's already threatened other countries, especially the United States, for deploying and providing weapons to Ukraine to fight this war. He's called on countries to stop supplying Ukraine with weapons. I mean, you're trying to understand that, you're attacking a country and you don't want other countries to help. And you know that this country really has a very small military and not even up to able to even stand your own military. So in a way, the war does seem unfair. But let's look at the attacks that happened yesterday in Ukraine on its Independence Day. Ukraine already expected these attacks. President Volodymyr Zelensky already warned people that there could be attacks. But do you think that it was at the with the intensity and the magnitude with which we're really expecting these missile strikes from Russia?
Look, it's very hard to say. I think we can clearly say that, and I don't want to say that every attack Russia is doing that it's on civilians, but it's very clear. You see the pattern. Russia is targeting civilian areas. So I think that Independence Day or no Independence Day, Russia is simply doing it. Interestingly enough, Defense Minister Shoigu, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, said that we are slowing down our efforts to protect the civilians. So I don't know what to say if you compare his words to reality when you see the images from Chaplin. So I think that this is just a pure propaganda, nothing more. It's very hard to give any value to these words. So again, Russia can stop the attack anytime Russia wants, and of course Russia can also try to intimidate and scare people with attacks like we have probably seen in Chaplin. So they're desperately trying to suppress the defense, Ukrainian defense. In fact, Russians are still somehow progressing militarily, but it's a very, very bloody progress. And really, I think that the best what can Russia hope is that the West will stop support Ukraine. So I think Russia will do two things in the next few weeks and months. I think that Russia will really try to attack civilian infrastructure to scare off people, and we will try to push West into somehow we'll try to blackmail West not to support Ukraine as much as not to in it's, as I said, nuclear blackmail, energy blackmail. They will try to use every means they have at disposal to find a way how to somehow destroy the unity of the West and so on. We will see what will happen in Italy after elections, for example. They will take place in September. My country might have early elections, in fact, because we have a very fragile coalition, and it is possible that in my country the government will be new government will be led by the oppositions that is less sympathetic to the Ukrainians cause. So we will see. I think that Russians will simply try to use every avenue they have to suppress Ukraine's defense and also to destroy the unity of the West.
A very interesting perspective on blackmail, the use of it in this war by the Russians. Let's talk about diplomacy now, and I know we saw a lot of that. You know, at the start of the war, it's tethered down a bit more now, and that's because of the unwillingness by Russia to sit at the table with Ukraine because they have certain demands that Ukraine must fulfill before any peace talks can take place. But the other mediators in this war, we're talking about Turkey now, which seems to have a better position, at negotiating with Russia and Ukraine. What do you think could be done further, by these countries, Turkey especially, and the United Nations, to help Russia and the Ukrainian presidents to sit at the same table and have a proper discussion concerning this war?
It's a probably $1 million question, and if I would have a good answer, I would be probably sitting in the UN. But as you mentioned Turkey, and it seems that Turkey has somehow a unique position in this conflict, being relatively close to Ukraine, but also having some good contacts with Russia. So I have to say that I'm not the biggest fan of Turkish President Erdogan and his somehow authoritarian politics. But I think that we probably have to talk to Turkey if it is possible. Turkey can do something to find a way how to create the atmosphere that both sides might feel that okay, it's time to negotiate. I'm not sure if it is possible. Turkish President Erdogan also said a couple of days ago that according to international law, Crimea belongs to Ukraine, which is quite a strong statement. So we will see. I don't have. Yes, as I said, Turkey has somehow a unique position, trying to somehow balance itself between Kiev and Moscow. But I don't have high hopes because I simply think that Russia is unwilling to try to find a peaceful solution. I think that Russia wants to suppress Ukraine, and then basically what Vladimir Putin wants to have from Ukraine is this kind of a satellite, directly occupied, or at least having some kind of government in Kiev that will basically just do whatever will Moscow say. So, and I think this is simply, all those things are totally, I think that those are red lines for any democratically elected government in Kiev. We might maybe talk about territories and so on, but if Russia wants to achieve what I think it wants to achieve, basically suppressing the free will of Ukrainians to enjoy freedoms and to pick up what kind of future they want to have, I'm not sure if we can build any meaningful diplomatic negotiations on this premise that Russia will at least partly rule over Ukraine.
Andrei Matisak, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation with you this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great day. We continue now as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posted a picture of a soldier wearing the insignia of a notorious Nazi SS division to his official Instagram account on Wednesday. That post, part of a series celebrating Ukraine's Independence Day, was not the first piece of Nazi iconography shared by Zelensky. He had posted the image on Instagram earlier on Wednesday. In it, a Ukrainian soldier carrying a rifle displays the standard of the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, also known as the 1st Galician Division. Comprising predominantly Ukrainian volunteers from the Galicia region, which spans what is now southwestern Poland and western Ukraine, the division is known for committing war crimes against Polish civilians during the course of World War II. Stay with us. We have more stories coming up after the break. Welcome back to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're turning to business stories now. Turkey's foreign visitors jumped 53% in July from a year earlier, exceeding pre-pandemic levels and paving the way for $37 billion in tourism revenues sought by the government in support of President Tayyip Erdogan's unorthodox economy. Foreign visitors to Turkey leapt to 6.67 million in July, mostly on the back of wealthy Russian visitors who opted for Turkey due to flight restrictions applied by Western countries after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The numbers of German and British visitors also rose strongly. Tourism revenues are vital to Turkey's economy, as Erdogan's economic plan focuses on expanding the current account surplus in order to tackle high inflation and interest rates. The tourism ministry raised its year-end target last month to 47 million tourists and $37 billion in tourism revenues. Now, Turkey has around 80 daily flights from Russia to Antalya, and we know that that number will also go up. The lira also makes Turkey a more attractive destination for visitors. The lira, which is traded at historical lows, is lost 27% of its value this year after it lost more than 40% of its value last year. But also happening, other developments out of the Russia-Ukraine invasion. Hungary has refused to impose further sanctions on Russia. The country says it does not support visa restrictions for Russians, despite several European countries imposing such bans for those nationals in solidarity with Ukrainians suffering in the war zone. Hungary's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Peter Szijjártó, says Hungary does not even want to discuss energy sanctions, which is about 85% dependent on Russian gas. These comments followed a meeting with the Estonian homologue, Urmas Reinsalu, during which Hungary reinstated its position and opposition to a strengthened package of sanctions that Estonia is initiating. Minister Szijjártó pointed out that it is impossible to provide Hungary with oil and natural gas without Russian energy resources. Our business correspondent, Amy John Mekwa, is here. Also going to make sense of it all. Welcome. So it seems that tourism is it's a revenue provider. It's an income generator for Turkey.
Yes.
But it's also an income generator for Hungary.
Yes.
And it says it needs the money much more than it needs to be.
Yes. So Turkey, I mean, is surviving on this now because I know you do a lot of foreign stories. You've heard about the droughts that they are facing, which has disturbed their production, their agricultural production. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, because the government has this vision of expanding the economy, so while other countries have continued to hike interest rates to deal with inflation. Inflation in Turkey is about 80%. That's higher than a whole lot of countries, even Nigeria, But they have refused to hike their interest rate because the vision of the government there is to expand, so not to make borrowing expensive. So they expect that since they're not hiking interest rate, people will continue to borrow and there'll be more money in the economy, you understand, and that will help the economy to expand. But the downside of that is that compared to other currencies, the lira, their currency continues to drop, as you have read. It's lost 25% in value. Now, that is also supposed to be at an advantage for them because it's supposed to make their exports cheaper, you know, so that more people can order for Turkey, clothes. A lot of Nigerians like Turkey stuff and stuff like that. But since their production is being hampered, you know, energy price and all of that, at least they have tourism. So while other countries are thinking of restricting visa to Russian oligarchs and all and tourists, now they are making a meal out of it. At least that's feeding their economy.
Yeah, but talking about tourism, we can't really enjoy that, can we? Because of the restrictions that Turkey has imposed on Nigeria visa-wise. So Nigeria doesn't enjoy, you know, some of those privileges anymore. But let's talk about Hungary for just a bit. And you know, we talked about it yesterday as well, you know, how it's difficult for them to even impose any sanctions in Russia because they do need Russian gas. They don't have enough.
Yeah, they don't have enough. And remember when they wanted to start the restriction, when the EU came together, Hungary was one of those that did not agree at the end. So they had to make some exemptions for them and say, okay, they can keep on getting Russian gas through the pipeline, you know, that's at least for their survival. Because, I mean, if they have 85% of their energy coming from Russia, source of energy coming from Russia, then where do they go to? So they're also one of those who are saying, well, I don't think they want to talk about it. I mean, they're counting. And of course, a lot of European countries are feeling it. Germany, which is the big European country, is also feeling it, you know, their energy costs and all of that. But, I mean, it's a price to pay if there is a way for them to speak against the war. But I guess Hungary is saying, I mean, we need to survive first.
Yeah, but how is production going in other European countries who had been dependent on Russian gas and Russian energy supplies and have had to cut some of that off?
Yeah, it's very expensive. Energy is very expensive. We talked about it yesterday where their products are now more expensive. Products are now more expensive in European countries compared to Asia. So some of those products which they used to sell, you know, which people from maybe like the US and all used to consume, they now go to Asia because it's cheaper, because of energy costs. I mean, there's a threat of it's going to be the coldest winter for them and all stuff like that, and they don't know how they're going to survive it.
Well, thankfully, they have other countries to also look to Africa, for example.
Yes,
with the
that's
deal
if
signed
we
with
develop
Algeria.
it anyway.
Well, hopefully this is our turn to shine again. Ini, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, two sports stories now. Ukrainian Premier League match has lasted 24 hours and 27 minutes instead of the normal 90 minutes after being interrupted by air raid sirens. Rock Lviv and Metalist Kharkiv kicked off their match at the Ukrainian stadium in the western city of Lviv at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, but it finished at 7:27 p.m. with 3 pauses after sirens sounded. Metalist eventually won 2-1, with the team spending 145 minutes in a shelter in total, and no strikes being detected in the area. Matches are held without spectators due to security reasons. Many clubs play their home games not in their own cities, but largely in the safer western or central regions. And as we end the program, we just saw a video of the Ukrainian winners of this year's Eurovision Song Contest on Wednesday. They launched a 24-hour fundraiser on behalf of soldiers who defended a besieged steel plant as the country marked 31 years of independence from Russia. That video was posted on Instagram. Kalish Orchestra called on Ukrainians to donate 24 hryvnia, 65 cents each, over 24 hours for those who fought on the front lines of the Azovstal plant in Mariupol. And that's it on our special coverage this morning. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.